All right, so we've gone ahead and got some siding out here. We're going to get going on that. A couple things I wanted to point out. First one being nails. We're using an 1¼ inch galvanized roofing nail. You can buy aluminum siding nails. We find the galvanized nails to work just as well. One thing I want to point out about the length of the nail is you do want to penetrate the wall. So if you have 1-inch boards, you may want 1.5 inch nails because you don't want the nail to stop short. The frost will get in behind it and work it out over time if you live in a cold climate. The other thing I want to point out is you want to get at least 1.25 inch, and you probably saw it on the button cap one, but on the 1.25 inch, when you're pounding that nail in like that, you see you have room. You're not going to hit things. If you use a shorter nail, you know, you'd be up and you'd be pounding on your hand a lot. So it just saves you some grief. They don't cost really that much more. And we're using a double 4-inch graphite gray vinyl siding that we got at our local lumber yard. It is actually made in the US, which is kind of cool. On the vinyl siding, the particular brand we're using covers 8 inches to the weather in height, and it's like 12'6" long. So that's something to keep in mind. It comes 24 pieces to a box, and there's 12 pieces to a square. So if you go buy a whole box at the lumberyard, you're going to get 2 square of vinyl siding. Now a square, to do the math, this wall is 8 feet long and 8 feet high. So we multiply those two together, and that's how many square feet we have there. And then we do that on all 4 walls of the building, and that's how many squares of vinyl siding we need. So 1 square of vinyl siding is 100 square feet. So if this wall was 10 by 10, that half of that box would cover the wall. Being 8 by 8, it's a little less than that. And of course, we're also got the door coming out of it. So you want to calculate things like that. When you get into triangles, it's a little harder to calculate. If you've got like a 12-12 pitch, a lot of times you can cut the triangle in half and make it a square, and that's close enough. If your pitch is a little shallower, you're wasting a lot when you cut it off. Like in this case here, we're going to be cutting a very long cut on that top piece of vinyl. There's not going to be any to salvage off that. So in this case, we just called this wall 8 by 8 to do our math. But you always want to add maybe 10%. So we're going to go ahead. Sue's going to come in here, and we're going to show you how to hang the first 2 or 3 pieces of vinyl, explain what we're doing, and then we'll speed the video up and do the whole process. Right in your corner, tight, right there. So what we're doing here, Sue's put her end in the corner, and we're going to put our end. It's pretty cold out, so we're going to go in the corner, our corner, about 1/4 inch to leave room for expansion. And again, you could measure this. We just find it just as easy to actually hold it up there and cut it right in place. Now this is where I was talking about being careful that you don't crack it when it's as cold as it is today. When you go across that lip right there, it can crack pretty easy if it's really cold out. So then what we're going to do is we're going to hold it down in here. We're going to bow it out in the middle like that and get both ends into our corners. And we start on one end and get it in our starter strip and poke it up in there. This starter strip doesn't give you that satisfying click, but you can feel the bottom of it and know that you're up in there. And we want to nail in the middle of our holes so it can move left to right. And we don't want to drive the nails up tight. We want to leave about 1/8 of an inch of space. Now you'll see that that piece still moves back and forth real easy, and that's what we want. We want it to be able to expand and contract. And we just hold a little bit of pressure up on it. We don't want to stretch it, but we don't want to let it sag either, if that makes sense. And we're nailing about every 16 inches. So now, we could just keep cutting full pieces and do this wall, but we're going to show you how to do an overlap. So when you do an overlap, there's a couple things to keep in mind. You always want to look at it like you're looking at it from the camera, and you want to start the farthest place away from where it's going to be viewed the most from the public eye. So in our case, this is the corner that everybody's going to walk up to and see. So we want to start all the way back here and work forward so our overlaps come over and they disappear. So we'll show you what we mean. This end here doesn't really matter if it's factory or not. On the next piece it will. So we'll set that in the corner and it snaps in. You see, it'll actually hold itself right there if we let go. And it moves real easy. So now when we do nail that, again, we just want to make sure we're pulling up tight. And we put our nails in the center of the hole. Now on this one, because there is an overlap, I like to put one nail near the end of my hole so that it can't walk out of the corner, if that makes sense. I leave about a 1/4 inch on my nail so it can still move some, but that limits its travel to about a 1/4 inch, but I only do that with one nail. So then I take my tape measure, go right into my corner, and I want about 1 inch of overlap right here. So I need a 35.5 inch piece, and I need a good end on the right end, and that's the key. We'll show you that in a minute here. All right, so we have our good end on the right. It's a nice factory cut, so it's going to look nice. And that will go in the corner first. Start with your far end, lock it in, and roll it right up into place. Then you're in place. Now, I'm going to go ahead and nail this one so that you can see. And we're going to get out of the sun on you. You can see that seam pretty much goes right away from your vantage point. If we'd have gone the other way, it would really stick out. So that's one of the little tricks that you want to know, is to start on the end farthest away from the public view. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to knock this wall out. We'll speed through this so you don't have to watch it in live time. And we'll come back and slow down and explain a little bit more when we get into the short pieces around the door. Okay, so now we have to cut our siding to fit up in here. If you remember from when we did our trim, we have a 1x4 up in under there, so the siding can tuck right up under. And we have 6.5 inches over here, so we're going to write that number right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come out until we get to 8 inches right there. And we're going to measure across, and it's 8 inches out. So 8 inches out, which will be right there, And then we're up 6.5. So now we have to connect those two dots. So if it was longer, we'd go down and get a level and everything, but with this one, we're just going to use our speed square. I'm going to connect those two dots as so. And we're going to cut that off. And we're going to remember that 8-inch number. Actually, what we're going to do to make it even easier on ourselves, so we don't have to do math, is we're going to measure that right now. From there to there is 83.5. So our next piece is going to want to be 83.5 inches long. Okay, now remember that our last piece, we said we wanted 83.5 inches to our long point, which would be on our right hand side of the sheet. So this sheet is setting here, good side out, so right side on the right. Now we can do the math on this because we know it's a 2/12 pitch, and we know that we're 8 inches up. So we can do the math on how many inches that is, you know, to that we need to come out here to do that. Or we can go up here and do it this way, which takes all the guesswork out of it. So we hold our tape measure up in there like that until we get 8 inches right here. We make a mark and we measure out of our corner, and we want 36.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure 36.5, and that's that mark. Now you see that's a pretty long run there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take another sheet of siding. We're going to use it as a straight edge. So we're going to set our two marks like that, and that's our angle. Now this is another reason that we did the trim the way we did. You notice when I stuck my fingers up in there, you have a good 2.5 inches of space up in behind that. If we'd used regular J-channel, you have about 3/4 of an inch of space. In this flat of an angle, it's hard to be real accurate. So if you get off by 1/2 inch, you're going to see that through the J-channel. And here we won't see that. So we're going to cut the piece off square first. And then we have to make this long cut. And there's no good way to do it with the snips other than just get in there and do it. And this is certainly where we could set up a saw, and we could cut these with the saw. But we're only going to have a couple cuts like this on this building, so we're going to tolerate it. Alright, so we've got our piece cut, and you'll notice we've got a lot of space over here where we can't nail anything. What I like to do on these pieces is I like to put a little bit of clear silicone right into the lip here, in spots. I put a spot about every 16 inches and I stick it in place, and the silicone dries and it's an adhesive. The one thing to point out is there are drain holes in this siding about every 16 inches, and you don't want to get the caulking over the drain hole because it'll squeeze out the bottom and make a mess. So we're going to go ahead and find our silicone and put you back on a time lapse here, and we'll get back to the front of this. All right, we've got our caulking, we got our siding. We're going to go ahead and go up. I like to test fit it first in a case like this before I put my caulking on. It fits like a glove. So now we'll take it out, we'll put our caulking on. And like I say, about an inch long bead, about every 16 inches, taking care not to get into that weep hole. Same thing, we start our corner first. And that finishes up the side. We're going to move around to the front and show you one little trick on short pieces, and then we'll go back into speeding this up so you don't have to watch us the whole time. So on a short piece like this, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a couple. And we're going to go about a ½ inch shy right now because it is pretty cold. And the other thing I like to do is I like to take my tape measure and go up through like that and see if the pieces are staying consistent. Because sometimes in an older house, things aren't square. And you don't want to cut a whole bunch and get out there and find out they're too short or too long. Too long, at least you can trim some off. Okay, I'm going to get my first piece started, then I'll explain to you what I'm doing. Okay, so these pieces are pretty short, and you saw on the long end we only had to bow it out a little bit to get it to fit. On the short sections like this, you know, it's hard to get it in there. What I like to do is I like to put my hand behind it. I put this in a little bit below where it's supposed to be, about an inch below. I get my hand right in behind it like that. Not sure how well that's showing up on the camera. And I carefully roll it in like that, in behind my J channel over here, and that way I don't kink it. I'm kind of gentle with it. If these are real short, you could bring them in from the top, but if they're about 16 inches or more, this works pretty good. So we're going to go ahead, well, one more bit of advice I'll give you. When you're going up both sides of a window or door like this, especially if there's multiple people working, it's good to take some reference points side to side as you go, so you don't get to the top of the door and find out, because you'll see, like, it's hard for me to show you, but Sue might be able to zoom in there. And I'm going to make a pencil mark right there, and you'll see that I can pull that siding up to there easily, and I can push it down to there easily. So it probably doesn't show up real well on the camera, but that's almost 3/4 of an inch right there, just by the way I change my habit. So if I tend to pull a little strong, and Sue didn't pull quite as much, by the time we get to the top of the door, we could be off by an inch. So that's an important tidbit to pay attention to. So we're going to go ahead and quit talking, and we're just going to go through this and get it done. Okay, so we're getting ready to cut the piece that goes over the door. What we've done is we've measured from the, our piece here and our piece there. We know we need to take 7 inches out to get above the door. You want to leave yourself a good 1/4 of an inch extra to get it down and locked in and put into place. And you'll notice how I measured that. There's several ways you can do that. You can make a mark and use a straight edge. I like to take my finger. Let's see if I can get that siding set up there for you. I like to take my finger and my thumb like that, and I get the tape lined up on my 7-inch mark. I can hold my pencil right there, and I can just run my pencil right down like that. It works on virtually anything. You can do it on plywood out as far as you can reach. Just be careful of splinters in your finger. That's usually plenty accurate for something like this. So we're going to cut this. Sue's going to come in and help me put it into place. And we're going to finish this job up. And one thing I want to point out before we go up there, you'll notice on this one, we're cutting it right near the nailing flange, so it's good and rugged. But let's say we're only taking like 2 inches out or 1 inch out. We'd have this whole piece of siding down in that J-channel with nothing to really hold it. So what I like to do in that case is I like to take my scrap that I cut out. I cut about 2 inches off in it. And I like to cut it about 1 inch like this. And this cut is really immaterial. Doesn't matter what it looks like. This piece will never be exposed. And I end up with that. And what I like to do is after I put my siding down into my J-channel, I set this down in behind the siding into the J-channel to hold it out tight. And it just keeps it from flapping around in the wind. Like I said, on this case here, it's such a shallow cut right there, we're not going to have that issue. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to go up above the door and get in our corners. and then we're going to slide it in our J channel. And we're going to come right on down past like that. I'm going to lock back into place, just like that. That's pretty much all there is to it. All right, that wraps up the siding on this project. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this project up. The one last thing we have to do is put a pressure treated board under the door so we can kick our feet off when we go in, and that's it. So hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, leave them down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.